Hello, thank you for taking time to watch this video titled Pathway to the GED. This content is designed to support volunteer tutors who are working with GED students at Literacy Pittsburgh. My name is Katie, and I am the Manager of Academics at Literacy Pittsburgh. The goal of this presentation is to give volunteer tutors the tools and information they need so that they can effectively support their students with a GED goal. In this presentation, we will discuss the structure, content, and format of the GED exam. We'll talk about some test preparation resources that we use here at Literacy Pittsburgh, as well as the readiness indicators we consider when deciding whether a student is ready to test. We'll talk about the process of taking a GED test and how you can understand your students' test scores. And finally, I'll recommend some professional development resources for you. Firstly, we'll discuss some general information about the GED, with a focus on the structure and format of the tests and the content you'll need to cover with your student. So to begin with, it's important to note that in Pennsylvania, there are several possible ways to earn a high school equivalency diploma. For full details, you can visit the Pennsylvania Department of Education website. At Literacy Pittsburgh, however, most of our students who are seeking a high school equivalency diploma do so by trying to pass all 4 subtests of the GED. So the GED tests are Reasoning Through Language Arts, or RLA, Social Studies, Science, and Mathematical Reasoning. These tests are all delivered on a computer, but students can test online at home or in person at a testing center. The tests are available in English and Spanish, and learners can combine tests in English and Spanish to earn their credential. But one important thing to note is that learners must pass all 4 tests in order to earn their high school equivalency credential. The RLA test is the longest of the 4 GED tests, with 150 minutes of testing time. Students do get a short break in the middle of the test. The RLA test measures both reading and writing skills. Students are expected to read and understand fiction and informational text, and respond to complex questions using skills like inferencing, finding main ideas and details, and identifying author purpose or point of view. As you work with RLA test prep content, you can support your students by making sure to read a variety of texts and by helping your student to build their reading stamina. If your student struggles to read and understand longer passages, try and support them to build a regular reading practice outside of your tutoring sessions. You can also help your student grow their vocabulary by learning and practicing vocabulary from the academic word list. And finally, you can support them by regularly using reading strategies like noticing titles and captions, highlighting important details in the text, and modeling regular comprehension checks as you read passages together. As part of the RLA test, students have 45 minutes to write an extended response essay. During this part of the test, students are usually asked to read and respond to 2 connected texts, often showcasing opposing viewpoints. The essay is a text-dependent analysis, not an opinion piece. This means that students must analyze how effective the arguments are in each text and support their analysis with evidence from the text. Some of the common challenges we often see at Literacy Pittsburgh are students simply summarizing the arguments from the text, or students just sharing their own opinion. In addition to working with your textbook materials, the GED website has some really great videos that show learners how to write a good extended response. Consider checking these out together, and we'll include the link to these videos below. The social studies test is 70 minutes long and students can use a calculator at any time during this test. Students are asked to read and understand social studies texts focused on civics and government, US history, economics, and geography. It is important that students know some basic statistics like mean, median, mode, and range to be successful in this test. So you will want to take time to review and practice these. Students often struggle with questions that ask them to read and interpret an image, like a graph, a chart, a map, a political cartoon, and so on. Practicing this skill will be a good use of your time. Finally, the more work you can do to support your student in gaining background knowledge, the better prepared they will be to read the complex texts in this test. Support them to build their content knowledge in your lesson, and recommend that they start to follow political news and current events. You can talk about these current events together and consider how they might connect to the learning you're doing in your classes. The science test is 90 minutes in total, and students have access to a calculator throughout for this test as well. The test covers life science, physical science, and Earth and space. It will be important for you to cover content from all three domains in your sessions. However, students are mostly not expected to memorize scientific facts, but rather to read and interpret science-related texts. Students must be familiar with the scientific method to be successful on this test. And as with the social studies test, it's also important to give your student plenty of practice reading and understanding graphs and charts. Finally, the math test is 115 minutes and comprises 2 sections with a short break. The first part of the test is completed without access to a calculator, so students will need to know how to perform some math operations by hand. For the majority of the test, however, students do have access to the TI-30XS calculator, which may be online or handheld if they're testing in person. Students are assessed on algebraic and quantitative math skills. It's very important as you work to prepare your student for this test that they know how to use the calculator and that they know how to access and use the formula sheet and the calculator reference sheet. We often see students missing questions that are not really too mathematically complicated, like finding the area of polygons. And knowing that these formulae are provided can make a big difference to students' test-taking abilities. So now we're going to talk about the test prep process at Literacy Pittsburgh. How do we help students to prepare for their tests? And how do we know when they are likely ready to test? The first test readiness indicator that we consider is the TABE test. TABE stands for Test of Adult Basic Education. It is a test that is approved for use in adult education by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And at Literacy Pittsburgh, we administer this test to our students with a high school equivalency goal at least 2 times each year. Students are assigned a level from 1 to 6 based on their test score. At Literacy Pittsburgh, we look at the test score in a little bit more detail, and we typically think that if a learner scores 501 or higher on the reading TABE, or 515 or higher on the math TABE, they're likely ready to try a GED Ready test. The GED Ready is the official practice test published by GED Testing Service. It is a half-length test with the same difficulty and question style as the real test. This means it is a great indicator of how likely a student is to pass the real test, and it is a great test preparation tool. There are no limits to how many of these tests a learner can take, which means it is a relatively low-stakes assessment. Literacy Pittsburgh asks all learners to take these tests, and we can pay for them so that they can take them for free. A passing score on the GED is 145. So when a student scores 145 or higher on the GED Ready, the GED testing system tells them that they are ready to test. At Literacy Pittsburgh, however, we ask students to aim for a score of 150 or higher on the Ready test before they attempt the real GED. This is because we frequently see students drop points between the Ready test and the real test. We aren't exactly sure why this happens, but we like to give students that additional buffer to be sure they are truly ready to test. So we are looking for a score of 150 or higher to indicate test readiness. Once your student scores in that range, you can support them to schedule their GED test. While they're waiting to test, you can focus on recommended content from the score report, and you can have them take some additional practice tests or questions to prepare. If your student scores between 140 and 149, they are close to being ready to pass the test. You can continue to work together on your test prep materials, and students should plan for an additional 12 to 15 hours of study time before attempting another GED Ready test. If your student scores 139 or lower, they likely need some additional work on the fundamentals. You can plan for at least 20 hours of additional study time before they attempt to test again. On the last slide, I mentioned the GED score report. This is a document that is generated after a student takes a GED or a GED Ready test. It provides a detailed assessment of the skills a student still needs to work on based on their performance on the assessment. It's a really great tool to support your student with their individual study needs, and it's something that your program coordinator would provide to you after your student took a GED Ready or a GED test. The great thing about the score report is that it can be linked to the textbook or online learning resource the student is working on. Here is a sample section of a score report from a student who recently took a math GED Ready test. The areas that the student struggled with in the test are shown here, together with the specific pages in the textbook, so that the tutor and student can maximize their time together. If you are working with a GED student on math, you are likely to be using one of these textbooks or textbook series, depending on your student's level. If you are nearing the end of a textbook, or if you have any questions about how to use the materials more effectively, please reach out to your coordinator or to the tutoring specialist. For students working on reading content, you will be likely using one of these materials. Students working on more foundational reading skills will likely be assigned a book from the Journey to Success series. These books support students to build generalized reading skills while also practicing reading a variety of texts across all GED content areas. Students who are closer to test readiness will likely be using these GED test mastery books. We typically ask students to choose just one reading-focused test to work on at a time. This helps to focus students and avoid overwhelm. So you may be working with just the social studies textbook or just the science textbook. Once your student has passed the GED subtest they are working on, we can support you to move on to new test prep content together. In addition to the textbook series, Literacy Pittsburgh students have access to online learning materials. You may already have used Khan Academy with your student. This is a free online resource with content available for a huge range of academic subjects. I especially like Khan Academy for math support. You may enjoy using their videos to supplement your own explanations during tutoring time, and the extra practice questions are a great resource for inside or outside the tutoring session. If you have questions about Khan Academy, please reach out to your coordinator. Literacy Pittsburgh also has a paid subscription to Essential Education, which is an independent online learning platform. Students can use Essential Education as a supplement to their tutoring sessions. The platform uses practice tests and other ongoing assessments to create an individual learning plan for each student. We've used this program for several years now, and we're finding that it is a great supplemental resource for our students. Please talk to your coordinator if your student would like to use Essential Education. In this next section, we will talk about some of the logistics of taking a GED test, and we will discuss how you can help your student interpret their test scores. As I mentioned before, a passing score on each GED test is 145. For most of our learners at Literacy Pittsburgh, that is their target. They just want to pass each test. However, depending on their test score, test takers can earn a college ready or college ready plus credit score range. If your learner has any post-secondary education plans and wants to aim for these higher scores, we recommend they check in first with the specific post-secondary institution they plan to attend to find out if college ready scores will help with placement. Each GED subtest costs $36 to take. Currently, the state of Pennsylvania is paying for learners who are resident in the state to take each section of their GED test one time. Learners pay for any retests as necessary. Literacy Pittsburgh can help students to access those testing vouchers so that they can take the test for free, and we can also help them to schedule their tests. However, before taking a GED test, we ask our students to have 12 hours of tutoring, class time, or other state-approved self-directed study, and a GED ready score of 150 or higher. And that's because that's where we're seeing the highest levels of success when students are able to achieve both of those thresholds. Students can choose to take each GED test in person or online. They can mix and match online and in-person testing. For students who choose to test online, there are some advantages. Students don't need to travel to get to a testing site, and they can test in the comfort of their home. There are also many more testing dates and times available. However, there are also some things to be aware of when considering online testing. Students don't have access to any handheld tools like a calculator or scratch paper. They must use the online tools provided in the testing platform. If students do not pass the online test, a retake costs the full $36. And students can only retake an online test one time, and then they must wait 60 days before they can try again. There are also very strict rules about the testing environment. You can find all those rules on the GED website at ged.com. Testing in person has many advantages. Students can use a handheld calculator and scratch paper, and an in-person proctor is there to support them with any technology challenges. In addition, if students do not pass the test the first time, they are eligible for a discounted retake that costs just $10. Students can also retake the test up to 2 times before they need to wait for 60 days to try again. However, students will need to be able to travel to the testing center, and the appointment availability is more limited for in-person testing. If your student wants help to plan their test, they can reach out to their program coordinator. Finally, let's talk about the professional development resources that are available to you as the tutor as you support your student on their GED journey. At any point, you can reach out to the tutoring specialist for personalized support for you and your student. The tutoring specialist can recommend a wealth of resources to you based on your individual needs and those of your student. I do want to talk briefly today about the resources available on the GED.com website. The Educators and Admins section of the website has a great range of content, including information about each test that you and your learner can review together, some detailed information about test prep materials and performance indicators, and a bi-monthly webinar series aimed at GED educators. And you can watch those live, and you can also catch the old recordings on there. To access this content, you can click on the Educators tab and explore classroom materials, teaching resources, professional development, and more. And if you need any help locating this, please reach out to the tutoring specialist. Thank you so much for taking the time to review this video today. If you have any questions or follow-up, please reach out to your program coordinator in the first instance.